The flight attendant's voice cut sharply through the quiet first-class cabin. "Sir, you need to stand up right now." Conversations stopped instantly. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Every passenger turned toward seat 1A, where Marcus Reed sat calmly, hands resting on his knees as if nothing unusual was happening. "I'm sorry," he asked quietly. Her smile was gone now, replaced by tight authority. "We've received concerns. You'll need to come with us before departure." A few passengers exchanged knowing looks. One businessman across the aisle smirked openly. A woman leaned toward her companion and whispered loud enough for half the cabin to hear. I knew something felt off. Marcus slowly lifted his boarding pass. "I have a valid ticket." The attendant didn't even look at it this time. Instead, she signaled toward the aircraft door, and seconds later, airport security stepped onto the plane. Phones came out immediately. Someone muttered, "First class costs more than some people's cars." A quiet ripple of laughter followed. Marcus felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. Not shock, not even anger, just recognition. He had seen this moment in different forms his entire life. The assumption always arrived before conversation. Judgment always walked in before facts. He stood slowly, careful and calm, aware that every movement was being watched. "Am I accused of something?" he asked. "We just need verification," one officer replied, avoiding eye contact. The humiliation was public now. Passengers leaned into the aisle to watch better, curiosity mixing with satisfaction. To them, the situation already made sense. A black man in a hoodie sitting in the most expensive seat on the aircraft clearly had to be a mistake. 30 minutes earlier, Marcus had walked through the airport unnoticed, carrying only a small bag. He preferred simple clothes when traveling. Wealth, he believed, should give freedom, not turn a person into a walking advertisement. But the moment he entered the priority boarding lane, the looks had begun. Confusion first. Suspicion second. Respect never came first. At the lounge entrance, the receptionist had automatically pointed him toward economy access, until his boarding pass proved otherwise. No apology followed. Just awkward silence as she handed it back. Marcus had smiled politely then too. He always did. When boarding began, the gate agent scanned his ticket and immediately asked him to step aside while others passed. Minutes ticked by while first-class passengers walked past him, some glancing back with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. He knew the pattern well enough not to argue, and now here he was, standing in the aisle while security waited to escort him off the aircraft. The businessman across from him shook his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered, as if justice were finally being restored. Marcus reached for his bag in the overhead compartment. The cabin felt heavy with expectation. Then a voice echoed from the cockpit. "Hold on. What's happening out here?" The pilot stepped into the aisle, adjusting his cap, confusion written across his face. He looked at the gathered crew, then at Marcus, and instantly froze. Color drained from his face. "Oh, no," he whispered under his breath before quickly walking forward. "Mr. Reed, sir, why are you standing?" The entire cabin went silent. The lead flight attendant blinked. "Captain, we're handling a seating issue." The pilot stared at her in disbelief. "A seating issue?" He turned toward the passengers, then back toward the crew. "This man is Marcus Reed," he said clearly, "the CEO of this airline." The words hit like thunder. No one moved. Phones slowly lowered. The businessman's confident expression collapsed into shock. A woman covered her mouth. One passenger actually whispered, "You're kidding." Security stepped backward immediately. The flight attendant's face turned pale. "Sir, we didn't know." Marcus raised his hand gently, stopping her. "That's exactly the problem," he said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, but every person heard it. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is before deciding they belong." Silence filled the cabin thicker than before. Moments earlier, these same passengers had watched him like entertainment. Now no one could meet his eyes. Marcus sat back down slowly, but the atmosphere had completely changed. The same people who doubted him now avoided looking in his direction. The pilot cleared his throat awkwardly. "We're honored to have you on board, sir." Marcus nodded politely, though his expression remained thoughtful rather than proud. As the aircraft finally prepared for departure, no one spoke loudly anymore. The earlier confidence in the room had disappeared, replaced by quiet reflection. Marcus stared out the window as the plane taxied forward. He remembered being 16 years old, standing beside his mother at an airport counter while employees questioned whether they could afford their tickets. He remembered her embarrassment, the way strangers watched without helping. The memory had stayed with him through years of struggle, late nights studying business, failed startups, loans that nearly ruined him. and the eventual success that allowed him to build one of the fastest-growing aviation technology companies in the country. 6 months earlier, his investment group had quietly purchased the struggling airline. Marcus chose not to announce himself publicly. He wanted to understand the passenger experience without special treatment. Today had given him the answer. After landing, videos from the cabin spread across social media faster than anyone expected. Some passengers posted clips before realizing who he was. By evening, headlines questioned airline bias and customer treatment. Executives panicked. Employees feared mass firings. But when Marcus addressed the company days later, his tone surprised everyone. "I'm not interested in punishment," he said. "I'm interested in change." He introduced new training programs, anonymous passenger evaluations, and strict accountability policies focused on respect rather than appearance. "Luxury," he told them, "is not leather seats or champagne. Luxury is dignity." Months later, Marcus boarded another flight anonymously again. A young flight attendant greeted him warmly with a genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, sir. No hesitation, no suspicion, just kindness." Marcus smiled back as he took his seat and the plane lifted into the sky. For the first time, he felt something different. Not victory, progress. Because real success wasn't proving people wrong. It was helping create a world where no one had to prove they belonged at all. The engines hummed steadily as the aircraft climbed higher, the city shrinking beneath the clouds. Inside the cabin, an unusual silence lingered. The earlier tension had not fully disappeared. It had simply changed shape. People avoided eye contact, pretending to focus on magazines or laptop screens. But Marcus could feel their awareness. Every small movement he made seemed louder now, heavier with meaning. The businessman who had complained earlier cleared his throat several times as if considering an apology, but pride kept him quiet. Across the aisle, the woman who had whispered now stared out the window, her reflection revealing embarrassment she could not hide. The atmosphere felt fragile, like a room after an argument where everyone realizes they went too far. A flight attendant approached Marcus carefully, her posture completely different from before. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a glass of water on his tray table. "Sir, I truly apologize for earlier," she said softly. "We handled that poorly." Marcus looked at her, not with anger but with calm honesty. "I'm not upset because of me," he replied. "I'm thinking about the passengers who don't get a second chance after moments like that." She nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. For Marcus, the issue had never been personal humiliation alone. It was the realization that countless others experienced the same treatment without anyone stepping in to correct it. As the flight continued, whispers spread quietly among passengers who had searched his name online. Recognition replaced assumption. Some stared at him with admiration now, others with discomfort, realizing how quickly their judgment had formed earlier. Halfway through the flight, turbulence shook the aircraft unexpectedly. The sudden drop caused gasps throughout the cabin. Drinks rattled, and a few passengers grabbed their armrests nervously. Marcus noticed the same businessman who had mocked him earlier gripping his seat tightly, anxiety clear on his face. Marcus leaned slightly toward him. First time with turbulence." The man hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I hate flying." Marcus gave a small, reassuring smile. "It feels worse than it is. Planes are designed to handle far more than this." The irony of the moment was not lost on either of them. Minutes earlier, the man had doubted Marcus belonged on the plane at all. Now he was quietly accepting comfort from him. After a pause, the businessman finally spoke again. "I owe you an apology," he said, voice low. "I made assumptions. I didn't even realize I was doing it." Marcus considered his words carefully. "Most people don't realize," he answered. "That's why it keeps happening." The man nodded slowly, visibly humbled. The conversation ended there, but the shift mattered. Change rarely arrived through grand speeches. Sometimes it began in uncomfortable realizations between strangers. As the aircraft began its descent hours later, sunlight poured through the windows, casting warm light across the cabin. The tension that once felt sharp had softened into reflection. Several passengers now looked thoughtful rather than judgmental, as if replaying the earlier incident in their minds. When the plane landed, applause broke out, a common habit among nervous flyers, but this time it carried a different tone. The pilot's earlier announcement still echoed in everyone's memory. At the gate, passengers stood to exit. Normally first class rushed to leave quickly, but today, movement felt slower. One by one, people passed Marcos, some offering quiet nods, others murmuring apologies. A middle-aged woman paused beside him. "Thank you for how you handled that," she said gently. "You could have embarrassed everyone, but you didn't." Marcus smiled politely. "Embarrassment doesn't teach people," he replied. "Understanding does." She nodded thoughtfully before continuing down the aisle. Outside the aircraft, airline managers waited nervously near the jet bridge. News of the incident had reached them before landing. Their expressions carried fear not just of losing jobs, but of facing the consequences of a culture they had never fully questioned. Marcus greeted them calmly. "No emergency meetings today," he said before anyone could speak. "Just listen first. We fix things properly." His composure surprised them. Many expected anger or immediate punishment. Instead, Marcus asked detailed questions about training procedures, customer complaints, and reporting systems. He wanted to understand how bias slipped into everyday decisions unnoticed. Over the following weeks, changes rolled out across the company. Training sessions focused not on blame but awareness. Employees watched real passenger stories. Role-playing exercises forced staff to confront unconscious assumptions. Anonymous feedback systems allowed travelers to report treatment without fear of being ignored. At first, some employees resisted. They insisted they treated everyone equally. But gradually, stories surfaced, small moments that revealed patterns nobody had noticed before. A passenger questioned more often than others. A boarding pass checked twice instead of once. A tone of voice subtly different depending on appearance. Tiny actions, repeated thousands of times, created larger harm. Marcus attended several sessions personally, sitting quietly among employees rather than speaking from a stage. His presence reminded them that leadership was watching but also learning alongside them. Months later, customer satisfaction reports showed dramatic improvement. Complaints about treatment dropped significantly. More importantly, employees began holding each other accountable, gently correcting behavior before problems escalated. One evening, Marcus once again walked through an airport anonymously. No headlines followed him now. No one recognized him as he approached the boarding gate. A young gate agent smiled warmly. "Good evening, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" Her tone carried simple professionalism, neither suspicion nor forced politeness. She scanned it once and handed it back immediately. "You're all set. Enjoy your flight." That was it. No extra scrutiny. No hesitation. Just normal respect. As Marcus walked down the jet bridge, he felt something deeper than satisfaction. The goal had never been personal validation. It was this moment, ordinary fairness, invisible yet powerful. Inside the aircraft, passengers settled into their seats, unaware of who sat among them. The flight attendant greeted him kindly, exactly as she greeted everyone else. Marcus leaned back as the engines roared to life. He thought about how easily that earlier flight could have ended differently. Anger, punishment, public outrage. Instead, it became something more meaningful. Proof that change didn't always begin with confrontation. Sometimes it began with a moment of truth that forced people to see themselves clearly. As the plane lifted into the night sky, city lights fading below, Marcus closed his eyes briefly, listening to the steady rhythm of the engines. For years, success had been measured in profits, expansions, and acquisitions. Now he understood a better measure. Real success was quieter. It was a stranger being treated with dignity without needing status to protect them. It was respect given automatically, not earned through revelation. And somewhere below the clouds, thousands of passengers traveled every day, each carrying stories nobody else could see. Marcus smiled slightly, knowing that if his airline could help even a few of them feel welcome instead of judged, then the humiliation he experienced that morning had not been wasted. The aircraft moved forward through the darkness, steady and strong, carrying people from different lives toward the same destination, a reminder that at 30,000 feet above the world, everyone was meant to belong equally.